Hello and welcome. It's just philosophy here. I want to talk about an idea that threatens modern society. One small aspect of social decline is the internal conflict between choosing to be an individual and serving one's community. This principle can be best represented by the contrast of individualism and tribalism. I'm trying to build a series where I talk about the rise and fall of civilizations, societies, and communities. And so with this being part one to said series, I'm going to try and keep it short and simple. Okay, so I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for the past few weeks, and that is individualism and tribalism. I'm going to start by defining these terms, or at least how I plan on using them throughout the video. So here we go. Now, tribalism, simply put, is the practice of being organized by or supporting tribes or their lifestyles. Now, for this video, I'm going to be referring to the psychological phenomenon of identifying strongly with a group, such as a social, ethical, or political faction. Examples of this include supporting a sports team, practicing a religion, joining a political party, and or adopting an overall us versus them mentality. Now, it's important to know that tribalism can provide a sense of belonging and trust, but it can also have the negative effect of separating people from other groups and or tribes with opposing beliefs. Now, this is especially harmful in today's society because we have things like confirmation bias, social media persuasion, political wars, etc. It's easy to separate people now, and a lot easier now to separate people than it has been in the past. Now, individualism, on the other hand, is a social and political philosophy that emphasizes the importance of one's individual rights. Individualism is based on the idea that each person has intrinsic value and that their unique perspectives should be appreciated. Now, with all of that out of the way, I want to talk about how this affects our societies and the world today. Now, most times today, we have the issue where people think that their governments or systems are designed against them. With factors like economic decline, rising cost of living, housing crisis, record high corporate profits, along with news outlets and fear mongering, an overall sense of doom for Gen Z and millennial futures is on a constant rise. Many people conclude that there is no place for common man. Phrases like the rich get rich, the poor get poor, etc. Even things like patriotism are on the decline, with 18% of young Americans, Gen Z, saying that they're extremely proud to be American compared to the 85% 10 years ago. So what does this mean for future generations? How will this affect the way people parent their youth? As we talked about earlier, tribalism or community provides a sense of belonging. How will future generations come to the conclusion that it is better to help the people around them if they feel they're a part of a system that is rigged and designed to keep them oppressed? In earlier days of human history, people had religion, communities, and villages to turn to. People were bound by social connection, prayer, faith, and an overall sense that what they did directly contributed to the people around them. People were proud to be a part of their communities, and people believed in something bigger than themselves. But nowadays, spirituality and the overall belief in something higher than oneself is on a constant decline. The percentage of Americans who identify as Christian has been declining for decades. In 2018, 65% of American adults identified as Christian, a number that is down 12% from the past decade. The share of Americans who are religiously unaffiliated has also been rising, with 26% of adults identifying as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. In the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, God is dead and we killed him. And this is just a small glimpse into the psyche of most people. Most Americans believe that their work is underpaid, undervalued, and unappreciated. Along with the belief that there is no afterlife or any God, where does that leave people's morale? Where does that leave the sense of community? We've all heard about the male loneliness epidemic, the rising suicide rates, female loneliness, and an overall disconnect in politics. Somehow we find ourselves in a moral conflict between choosing individualism and collectivism. Now, I used tribalism early on because it's something I'm a little more familiar with, and I like the term a lot better, but collectivism can be easily used as a substitution here. Nonetheless, we find ourselves in a moral conundrum. As a society, we have to choose between valuing each individual and valuing the society as a whole. For society to keep running, everyone has to contribute. But at a certain point, when people are unappreciated, how do they hold allegiance to a system that they deem as rigged? Maybe America is a product of too much freedom. Maybe giving each and every person the right and ability to be respected no matter what leads to a double-minded society. For society to function, there needs to be some form of social hierarchy. Everyone can't be rich, and unfortunately, everyone can't be an individual. Not everyone can be noticed, and not everyone can succeed. Now, on paper, tribalism sounds perfect. Each person does what they can to help further and or advance the community that they are a part of. But unfortunately, this hasn't worked in all the years of human history. It hasn't definitively reached a place of peace. If we look at the world today, it's a safe bet, but it's objectively not a bad thing. It keeps the human race alive, but it doesn't fix the problems within itself. Individualism, on the other hand, also sounds good on paper. To respect each person and to respect their beliefs and to allow them to live their truth. But again, it has its issues. Hypothetically speaking, if someone did have a solution to all the world's problems, they would simply be overshadowed by a mass collection of ideas, good and bad. There would never be any true sense of harmony, and every single person wouldn't agree with every other person. And if these people decided to fend for themselves, then there is no community, and thus there is no sense of belonging. Now, the thing is, I'm leaving this video with an open end, mostly because the reality of it is that no one really has the answers. Understand that there is no definitive truth. There is no solution. The reality of this is that if anyone had the answers to human conflict and could have world peace, we would already be there. But even then, another saddening idea is that if someone did, they would probably be overshadowed by other individuals who demanded that their beliefs be respected. So who really knows? I mean, certainly not me, Now, I want to thank you if you did stay this far, because this is as far as I've gotten into writing a script. So if you can't tell earlier, I mean, you probably can. I sound very robotic, but this is finally a point where I can speak freely and kind of speak from a natural perspective here. So what got me to this idea to where I wanted to talk about individualism and tribalism is it all kind of started with like more of a spiritual thing, I'm not spiritual. I'm going to start by saying that I am no longer spiritual. I used to be extremely spiritual in my youth, but I guess grew out of it, and that's kind of a whole thing that I don't have to go into. But a lot of philosophies that I live by have spiritual and somewhat religious roots, and so I kind of reflected on like more so like the concept of good and evil. It was as simple as it was like a pentagram, and I want to make a video where I kind of go into that. And it was like, what about it makes it evil? And I kind of just went into this whole tangent type thing. And it just somehow in this mass wormhole, I got to the idea of like, well, it's kind of a way too much to go into here because this video is not even about this, but I kind of believe that a lot of principles that are deemed as evil or deemed as bad are really just characteristics that if each and every person adopted, it could potentially lead to the collapse of a society in one way, shape, or form. And that is where I decided to keep it simple and just use individualism as a whole. If each and every individual person only took care of themselves, there wouldn't be a community. And a lot of principles like if you go into, I guess, Satanism in some sense, a lot of those principles aren't inherently bad. They're just bad in mass quantities. This is more so about like is essentially individualism in one way or another. I am not a Satanist. I'm gonna just go ahead and say that. But I'm just more so trying to paint a picture of good and evil, of like religion versus anti-religion in some sense. I just feel like I do want to eventually go into philosophy, segue into a bunch of stuff, and I have to start with simpler terms, that being religion, spirituality, different things like that, just to more so practice discipline, something that I'm a lot more familiar with, and something that I can freely talk about. Like this right now, this is like 3 minutes of me just kind of flowing a little bit. Each and every one of these breakdowns and these recordings are like 40 seconds a piece. I think the longest one I have is like a minute. So, you know, and it's like I understand what I'm talking about, don't get me wrong, but it's just I am a talker, and I will say the same things over and over again. And I just try to build structure and have a little bit of discipline. So without making this too long, I do plan on making more things in the future. But if you're here, thank you. It's greatly appreciated. This is just my first test run, just seeing how this works. Citations, sources are linked in the bio. You can check those out. I believe I have some of the things on screen. I'm actually in the editing portion of this right now, so I'm not 100% sure how this is going to turn out. But this is SGS Philosophy. Thank you and goodbye.